We often refer to our current time as modern. We associate modern with technology like cell phones and air conditioning. However, did you know historians believe the modern era began much earlier than the internet? They think the modern era started back in the 1500s. The Renaissance marked a shift in European thought away from the Middle Ages. The philosophical changes led to artistic and scientific revolutions, setting Europe on the path to modernity. It ran from the 1300s to the early 1600s, encompassing several other essential movements, including the Reformation and the Age of Discovery. These three events worked together to push Europe into the modern era, where people thought for themselves to discover meaning in the world around them. They established the foundation for modern art and thought processes and continue to impact how we experience the world today. It was not an easy change, so it's time to examine the complexity behind Europe's step into the modern era. How did the Renaissance start the modern era? The Renaissance began in the mid-1300s, but the transition from the Middle Ages to the Renaissance was gradual. It started in Italy, which was still recovering from the Black Death in the mid-1300s. The bubonic plague killed about one-third of the European population. Such a population shift is bound to lead to social changes, as the survivors had more economic opportunities than before. Italy was in a prime position for trade. Merchants from across the Mediterranean Sea could easily access many Italian city-states, linking Italy to trade routes stretching from China to Scandinavia. At the time, Italy was not a united country. Instead, it was divided into many different city-states, and they competed with each other for economic opportunities and, eventually, artistic achievements. This competition allowed merchants to grow wealthy. As their wealth and status grew, they began showcasing their wealth by becoming patrons, commissioning works and supporting artists in their endeavors. Some of the most famous patrons during the Renaissance came from the Medici family, a banking and merchant family who came to great political power in Florence and Tuscany. They used their wealth and influence to commission masterpieces, supporting famous artists like Michelangelo, Raphael, and Leonardo da Vinci. Like many others during the Renaissance, the Medici family was also interested in the classics. Scholars were rediscovering ancient Greek and Roman works, and those ideas and artistic styles influenced the Renaissance. One of the places this influence is most apparent is in Renaissance architecture. The Middle Ages architecture favored the Gothic style, but Renaissance architecture returned to ancient Greek and Roman influences, including columns, geometrical shapes, symmetry, and the golden ratio. The Renaissance architects were concerned with balance in their buildings. While it was important structurally, it also made the buildings more aesthetically pleasing. Geometrical shapes became more prominent, overshadowing the curves and spirals used during the Middle Ages. Squares, rectangles, and circles added stability to the buildings, but many of the buildings also relied upon symmetry. All parts of the structure had to be proportional to each other. This came from a philosophical idea that nature was symmetrical. To better copy nature, man-made things, like buildings, should also have inherent symmetry. This ideal proportion was called the golden ratio, which philosophers thought was God's secret formula for creation. It stated that every two parts must be equal to 1.618. Several architects used the golden ratio to build stunning buildings still in use today. Of course, Renaissance architecture focused on more than the building's outside appearance. Many famous Renaissance paintings were frescoes painted directly on wet plaster. One prominent example is the Sistine Chapel, which showcases the combination of proportional architecture and fascinating colors. Renaissance architecture inspired people to experiment, making mathematical discoveries to create buildings like the Florence Cathedral with its unique dome. Columns, symmetry, and the golden ratio continue to influence modern building practices, showing the Renaissance was one of the places where the modern era began. Renaissance architecture and art reflected Europe's philosophical changes and scientific discoveries. Because they were rediscovering ancient works, they began adopting some of those ideas, exploring humanism. Philosophy in the Middle Ages believed life was full of suffering, but humanism stated life could be pleasant, filled with food and beauty, while also focusing on education for its own sake. They also focused on human welfare instead of getting to heaven, although many humanist philosophers still believed in God. Humanism was a distinctly modern philosophy, pulling Europe out of the Middle Ages and allowing people to focus on the world around them. People also began questioning the Catholic beliefs formed during the Middle Ages, even questioning God's role in the universe. The Catholic Church attempted to stop these heresies, even forcing Galileo Galilei to recant his astrological theory in 1633. Galileo thought the Earth orbited around the Sun. The Church believed the Earth did not move. The tensions between the Catholic Church and those who questioned the traditional teachings became increasingly prominent as the Renaissance went on. In 1517, the Reformation, another significant factor in Europe stepping into the modern age, began. What were the impacts of the Reformation? The Reformation split the Catholic Church, creating Protestant denominations that are a significant part of modern Christianity. The conflict between the two groups was a defining event in the early modern era, even influencing political decisions. Some historians have argued the causes of the Reformation go even further back than the Renaissance. But one of the vital philosophical movements that finally pushed the Reformation into action was humanism. While humanism bolstered creativity and academic pursuits for the Renaissance, humanists encountered trouble when they applied that philosophy to Christianity. Humanism believed people had the right to think for themselves. For centuries, the Catholic Church had held the sole power to interpret the Bible. As people began demanding copies of ancient texts, they improved the printing press and quickly began printing the Bible. Scholars like Desiderius Erasmus argued people should be allowed to think for themselves. This meant that they could also interpret the Bible without the Church's input. People now had more access to the Bible, especially as it was translated, and they began to read it and ask questions about the Catholic Church and Christianity. These questions came to a head with Martin Luther, a German monk who initially only wanted to reform the Catholic Church. At the time, the Catholic Church sold indulgences to reduce one's punishment for sins in the spiritual world. The Church started the practice to help pay for new cathedrals, complete with Renaissance artwork, but it was a corrupt practice from the start. Luther was apprehensive about the situation. He believed salvation was for those who believed, not those who had money. On October 31, 1517, he legendarily posted the 95 Theses on the Wittenberg Castle church door, listing questions and suggestions for improving the church. Sadly, the Catholic Church saw this as a threat to their authority, and in 1521, they signed the Diet of Worms, labeling Luther a heretic for believing faith alone was the basis of salvation instead of one's actions. This did not stop the Protestant Reformation. It grew past Martin Luther and quickly became a religious and political movement. Martin Luther's followers became known as Lutherans, but another branch of Protestantism began under John Calvin shortly afterward. He believed in predeterminism and felt the Lord's Supper, a central part of most Christian worship services, only applied to the Spirit of Jesus. This difference set Calvinism apart from Lutheranism. Calvinism became popular in Switzerland, but soon spread across Europe. Even England became part of the Protestant Reformation. However, King Henry VIII's reasons were more political than religious. Henry initially defended the Catholic Church against Protestant ideas, earning the title Defender of the Faith. That changed when the Pope refused to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon. He had been married to her for almost 24 years, but they only had one surviving child, a girl named Mary. Henry was desperate for a son and decided to marry Anne Boleyn. So, when the Catholic Church refused to allow his annulment, Henry VIII broke ties with them and established the Church of England. While it was similar to the Catholic Church, it was outside its authority, bringing Protestantism to England. Several other countries and territories embraced Protestantism to free themselves from the Catholic Church's power, making religious decisions based on political gain. Over time, governments became more secular, limiting the influence of the Catholic Church. The Reformation was a critical part of Europe stepping into the modern era because it allowed people to think independently about their religion, allowing for diversification and plurality. It also eventually led to secular states, which is how the Western world operates today. Of course, the Catholic Church did more to address the Protestant Reformation than labeling people heretics. Criticism was rampant, and the Church needed to address its internal corruption. Historians call this the Counter-Reformation. Pope Paul III called the Council of Trent in 1545 to fix the Catholic Church's corruption, which included enforcing discipline and more strict priestly training. Roles within the Church, such as priests and bishops, were no longer available for sale and could not be managed from afar. Both practices allowed corruption, especially when people took powerful positions in the Church because they wanted power not because they were strong Christian believers. The Counter-Reformation revitalized Catholicism, shaping how it interacts with the world today. They sent out missionaries to bring people back to the Catholic faith, and one of the most famous groups was the Jesuits. They became an essential part of Christianity in countries like Italy and Spain. Through Spain, the Jesuits eventually reached the New World and left their mark on colonialism. They were part of a more extensive movement across Europe. Many countries began exploring the world, launching the Age of Discovery, and contributing to Europe's step into the modern era. How did the Age of Discovery influence modern politics? The Age of Discovery was a time of exploration and scientific discoveries. The Age of Discovery started around the mid-1400s and lasted until the 1600s. During this time, the Europeans explored Africa, Asia, and the Americas. While they did not usually explore with a set goal, most aimed to increase trade and economic prosperity, mainly because they lost access to the Silk Road in the mid-1400s. The Silk Road was a series of trade routes stretching from Europe to China over land. It had been a critical part of the international economy for almost 1,400 years. When the Ottoman Empire conquered Constantinople, the Europeans were forced to find alternative routes, so they took to the sea. Every European country wanted to trade to gain power, and explorers were emboldened by the quest for wealth and the Renaissance itself, which encouraged people to be curious about other cultures. The Europeans quickly navigated the globe, finding lucrative areas like the Spice Islands. European nations like France, Britain, Spain, and Portugal grew wealthy from their explorations, and their quest drove navigation advancements, building new types of ships and improving maps. However, this extensive exploration soon led to colonization and slavery. The Europeans destroyed cultures and subjugated millions of people in their quest for power. Colonization became a critical part of the modern era and influenced political decisions, wars, and human rights discussions. The modern era would have been very different without colonization, but we are still working through the consequences of it today, as countries and tribes struggle for economic stability and cultural freedom after years of oppression. Moving Europe into the modern era caused a significant paradigm shift as people left the Middle Ages. The Renaissance encouraged people to think independently and appreciate the beauty around them as they enjoyed life now. The Reformation created diverse religious beliefs in Christianity, weakening the Catholic Church's hold on Europe and eventually allowing secular countries to dominate Europe. Finally, the Age of Discovery sent European explorers across the oceans, where they discovered fascinating cultures and created colonies that forever changed the world. Stepping into the modern age did not happen immediately, but once the changes began in the 1300s, Europe would never be the same again. How would you like to get a deeper understanding of history, impress your friends, and predict the future more accurately based on past events? If this sounds like something you might be into, then check out the brand new Captivating History Book Club by clicking the first link in the description. To learn more about modern Europe, check out our book, Modern Europe, a captivating guide to European history starting from the end of the Middle Ages to the present. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.